Today we're going to be covering a bit of a tech talk on our Dupree Power Valve. This is part number 2100-070. So this is a pneumatic 3-inch gate valve, and it is something that we get a lot of questions on. We have people buying certain components to rebuild them. Some folks have these in their coaches for 30 or 40 years now, quite frankly. And so I will be building one to show how these go together, and hopefully would give you enough information to do whatever you're looking to do on your valve. So stay tuned. All right, so at the core of the power valve is the valve housing. Now this housing is the same housing as we have on the twist lock manual valves. Oftentimes, if you're going to be servicing the valve or replacing it, you won't be doing anything with the housing. Most times we'll be telling folks to buy our core assembly found on the website, because the valves are designed to come apart with just 2 screws you'll see here in the top, and the entire center assembly, the core assembly, will be able to pull out, so you'll be able to leave this actually in your coach instead of having to try to cut the waste pipes coming into the valve housing. So very, very seldom do we ever find anything wrong with the valve housing proper, unless of course you were to hit it or crack the housing somehow. So most times this is not a component that would need servicing. From there we have a paddle assembly, or this is actually called a gate, and so the gate is something that oftentimes after 20 plus years, the rubber here may start to, after enough times, cycles, you might find some water leaking past this gate. We had historically sold the seals by themselves that are in the middle of this gate. However, these require a special jig to get inside of the gate, and there is a right and a wrong way to assemble these. And you can actually see here, I don't know if you can see, you see some of the cracking that's occurred. This was because a customer, while trying to install it, actually distorted it, actually installed it the wrong way inside of the paddle. And so we're deciding that we're not going to sell the seals anymore as an independent unit. We've seen too many errors and too many returns occur because these were installed the wrong way. So we've lowered the price, and we're just going to sell the gate assembly by itself. And so this is the core of our unit. And then this is the actuator. This is the pneumatic cylinder that actuates the valve that we've seen there. That goes on this gate. We also have an end cap right here. This end cap differs from our manual valve. This is where we start to diverge a bit. And then, really there's just, usually we have an O-ring and then a T-handle, a couple air fittings, and 2 screws is all it requires to assemble a power valve. So I'm going to start going through there. Usually we start with putting an O-ring on the end cap assembly. This end cap, once we put the actuator on here, this will be going into the end of the housing. So we put that on there first. Next, I would install the actuator. We use a little bit of RTV sealer on the end of the actuator to help ensure a proper seal. So usually we just put a little bit of RTV sealant right here along the threads. And it doesn't take much, and we'll thread that through here onto the end cap assembly. Basically get it down nice and snug is all we're going to do here, like so. Next, I'm going to take and put a little bit of thread locker on this, so whatever type red thread sealer lock, on the end of here for our paddle assembly. Just a dab will do you there. And what we do then is we install the gate onto the actuator. I like to usually run it most of the way down the threaded post there. Just gonna actuate that up a little bit. And there's a jam nut on it. So what we have here is typically, oops, sorry, I'm off frame a little bit. You can just snug that up. So now we have gate with the end cap. Now our next step is to install it in the valve housing, but before I do, we have the aptly named valve schmoo. This is really just a silicone grease. There's a lot of posts we've seen about silicone spray. While it does work, we found that in terms of actuating the valve, the grease tends to do a little bit more. Some folks will actually notice on we've seen early 80s models, there's a sticker on the side of your air cylinder that would say lubricate valve with axle grease. And we found that was an interesting thing, but now we just use that. You'll notice I put some around the end cap, the end cap seal, and now I'm putting some on the seal on the gate, just on the edges of the gate, and I often will also put a little bit on the edges of the gate as well, just to help it, go up and down in the valve housing. Then we do the same thing on the other side, just a little bit of, of the grease. We use a DuPont product. The reason why I have it in this little container is we buy it by the big 5-gallon bucket, and so it's very hard to have on camera. So with this all lubed up, what I'm going to do is, let me stop for a second. You'll notice on the edge here, one side says outlet, the other says inlet. If you'll notice the valve housing, the side with the larger ring, this would be your inlet coming from your tanks to the outlet ring going to usually your hose fitting. So I'm going to put the inlet side in like this, and I'm going to press down. Listen for, there's a double click. The double click is actually when the O-ring that's in the middle there seats in the top of the valve. With that now, I will take and reinstall these, or install the top. Oops, I don't know if you can see this. I'm off camera here. Sorry. There's 2 screws at the very end of the at the top end cap here. Those are just fastened here real cool. It's hard to do while watching on the camera. All right. So that is, then next I will install a T-handle. This is just a threaded T-handle. Again, on some older coaches, this may be a ball handle. In fact, some with the ball handle come equipped with, there's actually a tool to help you pull the ball, but the new model, our current revision has that. And then finally, the only pieces left are the air fittings. And the air fittings, there's 2 versions. I mentioned our power valve comes, there's a part number 2100P-070, and there's also a 2100P-071. The only difference between those 2 models is these are straight air fittings that a lot of coaches have, and the 71 model has a 90-degree air fitting. Now, this air cylinder is the air cylinder is aluminum, and so I would caution anyone before you take and try to put a wrench on here and really crank this thing down. You can strip these threads out, and you'll notice, I'll take this back out for a second. You'll notice there's some pretty fine threads. Oop, focus here for a second. You can see there's some pretty fine threads on there. So I would recommend, that you can also note, I don't know if you can see here in the camera, sorry. There's a little rubber O-ring in there. The O-ring, if you snug this down pretty tight, finger tight like this, that's more than enough, and it will not leak. So I have a completed power valve. Again, we really don't see anything going wrong with the housings. So most times that core assembly, which includes all the fittings, the handle, an end cap, and that paddle assembly with all the O-rings, that core assembly, which is 2100P-071 or 70, I would highly recommend that if you want to just pull out these two screws at the end. I don't know if you can see that there in the, in the camera, but those two screws on your coach, you can just pull the center assembly out and replace it pretty quickly. I'm going to go get my test rig, and I'll be right back to hook it up and just show how that actuates with one of our solenoids.